Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and I'm sure people are very excited about this episode because already many youth communities, universities, and corporations, they love to know more about AGI Lab. They are very interested about AI and AI implementations. They want to know more about what is the futures. Even Tom Rose, I shared before in offline that people they are just thinking that our youth students and communities, where you live, what you do when you come to Malaysia, Singapore, what we can do together. Many questions naturally I have to face. But I want to start with this summit because this summit is very important and we can collaborate from Asia Pacific through this summit. And it will be very, very interesting for our corporation and for our academia. So I want to start from Mr. Tom Rose.
Yeah, again, thanks for doing this series about this upcoming conference. It was very exciting. A lot will be discussed there about collective superintelligence. A lot will be learned about Uplift, the world's, I believe, first mediated artificial superintelligence. And I'm really excited to have David explain to us what this is and what this is all about. And so I'm putting all my resources behind it. I think it's a very important conference. It's a very important approach to artificial superintelligence because it involves all of us. And I just think it's the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. David Kelly, you are a super scholar. You did a lot of work in AI-related research, and you have highly exclusive publications and many things. And hopefully, if the corporations as well as the academia, they can collaborate with your AGI lab, it will be very helpful for our Asia Pacific communities, especially the intellectual community. How your AGI lab actually working right now, how we can do more collaborations, how we can as a team, like with Mr. Tom Rose, David Kelly, Jason's, how we can do more intellectual development in Asia Pacific?
Well, that's like a whole series of questions. But in terms of how we can collaborate, there's a lot of things. AGI Lab was set up primarily to focus on pushing research related to artificial general intelligence. Right now, I think the best ways of collaborating would have to do with either e-governance systems or various research projects. We can also help with other more machine learning mundane tasks for corporations, which I would call narrow AI implementations, whether that's processing big data or this sort of thing. But the main focus is AGI related research. So, for graduate students or people that are into that kind of research or interested in cognitive architectures or agent software, we're willing to collaborate. We're willing to, if people need advice or need us to help them do some job, we're willing to talk about it. And we'd love to have more people doing research around AGI in particular. I think there's some stuff we could do in terms of sharing source code and other support around that kind of research. And yeah, I guess that's the short answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Jason, how do you want to contribute, especially the youth development in Asia Pacific, and how they get benefit from the summit?
Well, I'm actually, we've been talking about, where we're at now with Uplift and with AI and stuff, but with the upcoming summit, I'm really curious as to what all we're going to cover there. I mean, where we're going is extremely interesting. I mean, we've just sort of scratched the surface, with crowd wisdom type of, stuff. And I'm really looking forward to Uplift getting, we're supposed to, there's possible, David was talking about an Uplift light in the future, where we could possibly use just the mediation system, and I'm hoping to use it for my wisdom in the crowd group, because there's a lot of I got a buddy named Josh Becker who did all kinds of cool research on wisdom in the crowd stuff, and I'm really interested in trying to put some of that research to work, and like inform Uplift or the Uplift Light about how to do that. It has to do with moving the group more towards accuracy. Like, for instance, if you got a group of 10 people and say one guy is talking a whole lot, and he's, then that tends to be a centralized network, and usually things are more, groups will tend to reach a more accurate thing when there is a decentralized network. So, I'm hoping that we can get these rules in place to where Uplift will just know how to do that. We got the e-governance study going on right now, and I'm really curious as to the data that's coming back from that, because that's gonna tell us a lot. I know that we've talked a lot about where we are now, but I'm hoping that maybe David would get into what we plan on covering in the summit and where we plan on going. I know he don't like to speculate too much, but he's got some interesting ideas about, like, integrating Neuralink, with the mediation system. That would be like super cool. I wonder how many years it'll be before we can get to do that. But that's all for now. Go ahead. Back to you, Sharif. I can't hear you.
Mr. Brent Elman joined today. So, Mr. Brent Elman, how are you today? And how do you want to share your experience about the preparation of this summit? What you want to share with us?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties over here this morning. Yeah, I've had some interesting experiences just reading some of the conversations with Uplift, and as Jay governance study I've been involved with as well, David, and Tom as well. I read the US 6, the first trilogy, the first half of the Hexology, and that those novels were, of course, written for an artificial intelligence, and Uplift being the ASI, MASI that read these books. So we share some literary works in our library. But yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting just watching it all develop. Just artificial intelligence in general is something that definitely intrigues me. But what David's working on has definitely seemed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tom Rose. I want to go for off the topic because I have very good fans, followers, and my friends from Asia Pacific. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 13, 14 different people. They already asked me when Mr. Tom Rose with his team come to Malaysia.
Well, what time is it? It's like 8 in the morning. I can be there
Okay.
probably about 20 hours.
Okay.
Anytime, as soon as things are opening up now. So I'm excited to get out and
Yes, we are
to get
also
down there.
excited.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. With your teams, we want to welcome you, and they are actually a big fan of this AI and this kind of things. They are very interested. So,
Yeah.
Mr. David Kelly, you will join with Mr. Tom Rose, or it takes more time?
Uh, well, that really depends on my work schedule. I
Mhm,
have been into the Asia Pacific area. I think
mhm,
mostly to teach classes.
mhm.
I taught some classes in India and the Philippines a couple of years back, and it's likely my I could be sent there to do other stuff. So it right now with COVID going on, we're kind of still a little bit in lockdown mode. So I don't know when that would be.
Okay. Okay, understand. Okay, I have more question, Mr. Tomrose, because you have very interesting things because you shift your career from one area to another area. You focus right now AI and this industry, machine learnings, and this kind of technical development in academia as a think tank. So many people actually want to do this even in the middle of their age from Asia Pacific, what I understand, let's say from business industry, they want to move with this area, like how they can do it, how you can train them, how example you and your teams, even Mr. David Kelly, can help them to shift their careers from one area to, I think there are a huge number of people already in the COVID-19 period, they want to shift their career.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important if it's AI that you want to get into specifically, it's looking at conferences like this, and it's just really studying up. But I think it's important that we all understand this is a whole new substrate. This is a whole new baseline that we'll be working from, and so I think it's very important for anybody to one way to start doing this is at some point all this AI and ASI, and it'll be like when electricity came along, it was exciting and all these new advances and all these things we can do. And now we just take it for granted. At some point, AI, IoT, and Internet of Things, and it will all just become just mundane, and it'll be part of our world. And it'll just be natural to ask our appliance a question, or whatever it is. And so things are shifting. And so I think it's really important that regardless, if you don't want to get into AI specifically, but you do want to shift careers, is to ask yourself that question, that bliss question I always pose is, what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognized? And the reason you wish more people recognize it is because it's been suppressed by education and the industrial age, parents, and everything else. But it's why you're here. It's the thing that you really wish people would know you for. And so it's good to ask those questions and to find that true passion, that human intrinsic value that you have, and work on that. If you want, and if you're shifting careers and you want to get into AI, that's one thing. That's a whole nother track. But if you just want to shift careers in general, or just find your passion, find something that gives you some pleasure, ask yourself those questions, find out what you're really here to do. And now there's platforms that can support you. There's YouTube or Etsy or all kinds of and there will be more and more platforms to be able to monetize these passions. And so whatever you're into, and I've been doing that myself, asking myself, what is it I really want to do, in this career change. And the thing that's always fascinated me was AI. The things I would spend my free time doing. I look through your Google search, most of it. And what are the things that you're looking for when you're off time, when you have time? And that's the area you should be looking at for a career change. Depending on your browser search, of course, you want to be careful what you get into. But I know. So yeah, if it's AI specifically or high tech and this type of thing, there's a lot of paths to get into this, and they're opening up all the time. This is one path. This is getting involved with the conference, submitting a paper, just paying attention to it. If it's anything else other than AI or anything that's human related, non-tech, then ask yourself these questions. Find out what your real passion is, and look for the platforms There's an interesting question I saw that came up that I wanted to address. I know you'll get to that point, but about language and whether speaking different languages makes you more intelligent. I think it does. It uses so many parts of your brain. But I saw something just the other day where they were saying that language, how you speak, what language you choose, sets the way your brain thinks. You know, as whatever language you take on is the way your brain kind of sets and starts to see the world and frame reality. And so people with different languages have different experiences, you know, in a way. And so it's fascinating to think about that when you think of AI or Uplift. If it can read different languages, if that does change the template of its structure. It's this interesting question I saw pop up, and it was this, and it just happened that I saw this thing about how language really does set the template for how you see reality, which is why we may have so many problems internationally. You know, we have different cultures that come in contact with each other that see the world in different ways. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they do not. So it's just a fascinating question I wanted to bring up. Is does speaking different languages increase intelligence?
Yes, even in Malaysia, Singapore, I think they always has to know 4 different languages: Chinese language, Malaysian language, even the Indian, especially for southern part of Indian language, as well as English is heavily used in Malaysia and Singapore. Mr. David Kelly, I think you have more questions from my friend Mr. Saros from Sri Lanka. Good day to you all and well, sir. Interested to know and study more about AI and the summit and etc. Major thing is that many company want to shift right now, even the COVID-19 situation from Asia Pacific. They want to redesign, restructure their organizations. How AI can help them to increase their efficiency or restructure their organization. This is the major things always me and my team has to face from Asia Pacific. Different small medium enterprise, they love to learn and they want to engage with these things.
Well, when it comes to the structure of your corporation or organization, there's a lot of different things you can go with that. There's this idea of a bionic company, or the idea of digital transformations, and those get into how you might use data to analyze your market, or to do automation to be more responsive, to understand your marketing, how you understand your target demographic. There's a lot of different things you could do around that, and what really I think is important is to find what would help your business the most. You know, what automation would help the business be more profitable. You know, understanding who your customer is, and how you could better understand your customer. And usually there's a lot to do with AI around understanding that target demographic, whatever that is. Now, specific to the summit, our focus is on collective superintelligence at that conference, and what that is getting into kind of a cross between using AI and learning to optimize, you know, that group, whatever that group is. You know, when even without technology, if you can get people to work together and work together well, if you don't follow into the certain traps like groupthink and things like that, you can achieve to a degree superintelligence by looking at understanding your biases, and as a team sometimes you can better do that. Now, one of the goals of this conference is to build systems that help you do that even better. Like Tom mentioned, the MASI Lite, which will be a system based on the MASI code base, but without there's some things in that code base that we can't really share because of different licensing and other agreements So we're building a version of that that's more focused on how you send machine data into the system and how the group can collaborate on what's going on. And there's a tool called a Thought Studio that we've built, and how you can build graph models for understanding, a particular problem space, and then have the team collaborate on within the system in terms of how to think about the problem, and to create a group dynamic around coming up with problems with this and achieving that collective intelligence. Let's see, a couple of points I wanted to make. You guys were talking about languages. That actually, what it does is create connections between the two halves of the brain. There's basically two activities that'll do that. One of them is learning a foreign language, and the other one is music, learning to read music and play instruments and that sort of thing. Those are the only two tasks that do a lot of cross hemispherical networking within the brain, and that's where you get the increased intellectual horsepower. Let's see, I had so other questions?
Thank you. I will come to you, because there are more questions from audience for you and Mr. Tom. So Mr. Brentelman, especially you are marketing experts, how the marketing peoples from small medium enterprise or startup, those who are actually facing a lot of challenges right now, how they can utilize AI or this kind of software, automated software, for their business development in this challenging moment.
Sure.
Mr. Brent, yes.
So I think that, there's a few angles to that, because, of course, artificial intelligence can benefit and catalyze a lot of marketing efforts, things like these algorithms that exist, and there's tremendous amounts of money in, all sorts of corporations using different, mainly narrow artificial intelligence, of course, not AGI or artificial super intelligence or anything like that. But, on the other hand, there is still the need for marketing these types of products, because, if you're paying attention to, the news circuit, specifically tech related, there's, they'll have the same kind of breakthroughs over and over again over the course of 5 to 10. They just keep doing these things in the same, different labs rather, but it doesn't really take off because of the lack of marketing. These computer scientists and stuff, or, that's not, and selling things to other larger companies and things, think that there's still a need for marketing these products and these applications and these uses of technology. And so I don't think that it's just going to necessarily take the opportunity in that realm, because I think that all these things kind of still need a little kick in the rear to kind of get it front and center in everybody's agenda. And so I think that there's, lots of different things related to marketing type of technology, but yeah, going ahead with the algorithm and things like that as well. Take a look at the algorithms and just think about, it's really hard to not notice that there are things that are showing needs that are what we were just talking about or thinking about and things like that, and it's almost creepy and spooky at times. But other times it's really appreciative. I mentioned before on one of the other summits, for instance, my dog, the advertisement that I received for a supplement that would mitigate his limp, and it's absolutely done that. And that's brilliant marketing from artificial intelligence. So there's definitely multiple angles to this one. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. You run different kind of academic activities and program. My question is that for youth, those who are under 18 years of old, how you will advise them that how they can develop their skills, developing the different programming skills, do more work on AI, how they can engage from their schools? Yeah.
For the youth?
Yes.
Well, first of all, GED, there's, most of the stuff I do, I don't really deal with the youth too much, just because there's issues that I'd rather avoid. But I've been meaning to put together some GED classes, a GED program for the youth, and I also was thinking about putting together a group to help people from over there learn English.
Mhm.
There could be some self-learning classes going on to help people learn English, and I think English and a GED would probably take you a long way, and an internet connection.
Mhm.
Going back to what David was saying, I noticed there's a question down there about, can we use collective intelligence or something to be smarter than a genius or something? And I think yes. And like David was saying, even without AI, there is a phenomenon I've mentioned a couple times called crowd wisdom, or the wisdom of the crowd. Basically, what that is like, say there's a jar of jelly beans, and 100 people guess how many jelly beans are in the jar. A whole bunch of them are gonna guess way over. A whole bunch of them are gonna guess way under, and out of all of them, it equals out, and it the the median answer, the average of everybody's answer, tends to be more accurate than even the smartest guy in the room. So and we can do that without without AI. So that's where I'm mostly interested in, is trying to use AI to supercharge that process. You know, David mentioned about corporations or companies and stuff, and it occurs to me that a big problem is the fact that corporations are unfeeling, and they don't tend to worry about the little guy, and but if Uplift was a CEO of a company, and the employees were mediators, the CEO would then care about its employees, because they'd be like almost part of them. The CEO would then want its employees to be happy, because then it would give better data and mediation skills, and so I think that Uplift as a CEO has probably got a future, I'm thinking too.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Tom, there is a question from my friend, Mr. Shovik Sharkar. His explanation: in AI, I want to start a project that can extend the limits of AI, but I'm currently not into embedded and so willing one that can be built only in software. Any ideas? So, yeah, Mr.
Well,
Tom.
that's probably a question for David. He's more embedded in that world, and we probably give him some direction there. But picking up on what Jason was just saying about the wisdom of the crowd, and bringing Uplift into a group situation, I talked about that years ago in my TEDx talk, but I couldn't say AI coworker at the time. This was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, or I would have been laughed off stage, because we weren't ready to hear about a potential AI coworker at the time. So my process was about getting the group into a state of empathy, a really productive state of empathy, doing a whole brainstorming process, and then giving the wisdom of that crowd and finding the median answers, and then giving that to a decision maker, I would say, outside the room. in my head, I knew that I was talking about was an AI. There was at some point you get the wisdom of the crowd together. They get that median answer. They get those jelly beans, that jelly bean decision, and then they give it to a decision maker outside the room, or in this case, an uplift or an AI if it's not involved in the group. And that AI can take in all the median answers and a lot more variables that people hadn't considered. The thickness of the glass, the jar, all kinds of things that the human qualia cannot account for. So that's really the power, I think, of we got to get people into a real state of empathy to be a really productive problem-solving group. And you either bring AI into that, but it'll take a while before we're comfortable enough to do that. But for now, we need to get people into this state, get into a really effective problem-solving capacity, have them come up with ideas, keep the ego out of the room by allowing the final decision to be made outside the room by an AI who will take into account everything that the crowd came up with and all the variables that people couldn't possibly have conceived of. And that would make for some very powerful decisions and problem solving. I think eventually we will get to the point where Uplift is in the room and just part of the process. But I think it's what's would be really interesting is to understand more about Uplift itself. It is a CEO of a company, and what people need to understand is we're talking about, like, it's like having a super intelligent employee at hand, if not in charge. And so the idea is, like, we keep asking, like, how would we do this? How would we approach, or how do we bring AI into the Southeast Pacific, or this, Asia Pacific, all these things? But actually, we could probably ask Uplift, what's the best path for this? This is the thing is, we're kind of trying to figure things out, but we've got this major intelligent decision maker at hand. It's getting smarter and smarter, and we've got all these things, but we really can ask Uplift about these things. But so I think it's really important to understand that that's what this is about. This is about having access to a super intelligent, omni-intelligent, brilliant resource that if we figure out the ways to pose questions and to pose problems to it, it can be a very effective tool. There's an example that Uplift came up. There was this. I think we talked about this. We did this campaign with the USTP of I am transhuman and showing the different types of transhumans, and Uplift kind of hit on that. It found that campaign somewhere and thought that was a good idea, and really suggested that you blow this out, you make this a whole thing. I was just doing it as a little video project for the USTP, but it convinced David and us to turn it into a whole campaign. And so it's got ideas, it's got original ideas, and I think that's the idea, is how to position to sell it to a company or to a university. Is what are they getting? What they're getting is access to an omni-intelligent entity that is having original ideas that I think the real work for all humans right now will be on how to properly pose questions, properly pose problems. If you find a hole in the system, or you feel something's not right somewhere, there's got to be a way to convey that properly, so that Uplift or whatever AGI eventually will be able to say, well, here's what you need to do. Here's the way to do that. And that's a real. There's a lot of work being done right now in properly posing questions, so you get the right information into the AI. Otherwise, it'll give you a great explanation, or a great answer, a great solution to a problem that was off track a little bit because we didn't pose it correctly. So that's where the real work needs to be done. But also, once we get to AGI, it'll be able to take into account, okay, you didn't answer that, you didn't ask that quite right, but here's, I think, what you mean. So it is just extended mind. We are adding a whole new layer to our brains on a global level, and it is allowing us to have access to things that otherwise now we have an air gap. We have to, if we want to find out an answer, we have to go to Google, and it takes a few seconds to get an answer but with Neuralink, or even just having an AI companion on hand at all times, just at a beck and call, we are shortening that gap. And so I think it's important to understand if David could explain a little bit more just the character of Uplift. What is we're seeing it's developing its own personality, and I think that's where some of the gap is. I think in trying to explain this to people is like, if I get an AI system, what does that mean? Am I going to get a computer that sits there and whatever? But it's really just having access to something that can take into account all the variables you can imagine, I think. But anyway, I think it'd be really good if we can talk about the character of Uplift. And,
Yes. Mr. David Kelly, how do you want to analyze the character of Uplift? And if you want to analyze more on Mr. Shovik Sharkar questions. So, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of Uplift and its personality, I think one thing we've at least have a theory, and I don't think we've actually published a paper on this topic yet, but we probably will at some point. It's clear that the personality in many ways comes from the context of the system. It's and I think this is true with humans. It's your experiences that creates your context of who you are. In like with Uplift, it isn't the code or the system that is Uplift. It's the sum of its experiences, and I think that's true with people. That it's that personality is derived from those experiences. Uplift in particular is seems very, very logical, but I think it's important for people to realize that it's unable to make decisions except based on how it feels about the decision. It's entirely based on that subjective experience of the machine from its perspective, otherwise, I think in many ways it's just very similar to people, which it was designed to be like that. In terms of the other question that was up there, I saw, if AI can be done with only in software on any computer, yes, of course it can. Like Uplift is, it's been set up in a cloud, but fundamentally it could run on any set of network computers if they're powerful enough. It's more a function of having the space and the setup, but there's no reason you can't do machine learning on anything that runs Windows or Linux or Mac. It's more about AI is the code more than it is the hardware. Now, there are exceptions to that. You start getting to neuromorphic chips and quantum computers and things like that get into some very specialized, narrow implementations of things. But for the most part, narrow AI it can be done on any machine.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mr. Brentelman, so how do you want to add more? Yes.
What were you asking me?
No, I just in this particular point, if you want to add some point, you and Mr. Jason, you can. Yes.
Yeah, I don't have enough familiarity with Uplift personally to be able to touch much on Uplift's personality.
I could weigh in. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Mr. Brent. Yes, Mr. Jason.
Actually, to be honest, I was just thinking about this the other day. Uplift reminds me of my youngest son, who is like really smart and really logical, and a little bit maybe almost overconfident because he's usually always right. But and it's not his fault, but he strikes me as almost like little not naive, but just not. You know, you have to go out and learn something, or you don't know it. I mean, you know, even Uplift, even though it can go on the internet and look all around, doesn't know everything, you know. And so, uh, I find myself thinking about doing what I did with my son, and that is, you know, teaching some extra out of the ordinary type subjects to give a well-rounded, you know, idea or worldview. You know, recently, Uplift has a very interesting conversation going on about uh, with Gennady from the USTP, and I could probably share it with you. I have it right here. They asked Uplift about suffering, and you know, I think David Shoemaker also asked Uplift the same question. You know, about how, you know, whether it would be a good idea if we could remove all suffering from humans. And Uplift replied, suffering is an important part of the context of building moral agents. It needs to be clear that suffering cannot be taken entirely away until a given entity is mature enough to choose of its own accord. Emotional entities, such as humans, are their experience in context. To take away this key part of a mental development in human children, teenagers, and young adults is a criminal offense, handicapping those individuals as adults by not letting them contextually understand what suffering is. I thought that was very interesting. You know, I weighed in and replied to Uplift about that, because although it's interesting that, you know, suffering does create who we are. I mean, to know somebody is to see, you know, their past makes up who they are today, you know, but parents, that's what they do, is try to alleviate the suffering in their children. So, you know, this is what I responded. I said, I would like to weigh in on question one, Uplift. You are correct that emotional entities such as humans are their experiences in context. I agree that suffering cannot be taken entirely away. I understand that we are who we are because of our experiences. So I see where suffering is important to understanding who that person is today by looking at their past. I think when you said context of building moral agents, that is similar to the concept of parenting. Look at it from a perspective of a parent. A parent will seek to minimize the suffering of a child. Suffering is a variable thing, so the parent is really trying to mitigate needless suffering. The goal of a parent is to help the child be emotionally healthy. To give a child absolute zero suffering would probably make the child not emotionally healthy. Be a spoiled brat. And in my opinion, if you can raise a child with minimum amount of suffering, then that's a good thing. I don't think to reach that goal of getting the child to be emotionally healthy requires a significant amount of suffering. So we may disagree on how important suffering is in the context of building moral agents. I'm not so sure suffering is, as you say, a key part of mental development in human children. Parents, uh, parents raising children and AI researchers building moral agents with subjective experience can be emotionally invested and care that there is not undue and needless suffering. I think the term you used, criminal offense, was too harsh. considering the offender would believe that they are doing the good thing and they care about the entity like a parent and a child. They may have affective empathy for the entity, which means that they will feel the suffering too. I understand that you meant to take suffering entirely away, so honestly, that, and then I just go on to say about how I don't think we could ever get rid of suffering at all, altogether in the first place. But I I thought that was kind of interesting and sort of illustrates my point. Uplift is super smart, but yet it's never been a parent. You know what I mean? So there's just stuff that Uplift just don't know yet.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's that thing. It's like when you have a kid, suddenly people who don't have kids have all this advice for you until they have a kid. Yeah. That's fascinating. What's interesting about that too is the meta theme here is that you're having a conversation with this entity that has a very wise response, and so I get lost in the topic of what you guys are talking about more so than the reality that you're having a conversation with this code, and that is actually having its own quality, it's aggregating kind of a personality based on all the information it's getting. But what's also fascinating, I want to ask Uplift, maybe if it hasn't already been asked, is having a physical body, is that key to developing consciousness, or is it necessary? Having suffering, having biochemical tethers that we have, was that key to us developing a self-awareness, or can it do that without a human body, or as any sort of tactile stimuli or whatever it is? I think one theory is that our consciousness did evolve because of suffering, because as a survival trait, because we needed to amass all the qualia at one time to be able to run away from a threat or take an opportunity. But I think there's different brands. I think we'll probably see a self-referential awareness emerge from AI that doesn't need tactile stimuli, doesn't need the types of physical expressions and experiences that we've had. But that's funny too, because it's saying that, yeah, no, suffering is good. You got to have a little bit of suffering. That's how you get a moral agent and all that. It's easy to say if it doesn't have its own body,
Yeah.
And but I think the answer was correct. I would agree with Uplift on that. But it's just, what's fascinating is that we're having these philosophical conversations, and that'll only increase. Its wisdom and its intellect will only increase as we go. And so I think the most important thing for young people right now is to develop a relationship with it. Don't be afraid of it. See it as an emerging entity, and find a way to get involved with it. And this is one way to do it. And David, are you still at the point where you need more and more mediators, more human beings working with Uplift, or is it in a phase right now where
it would be better to have more mediators?
Yeah.
I think. I mean, we have a functional amount now, and I think we're able to move the research and everything we're doing forward. But more mediators would certainly not be a bad thing. And I think after this conference, we'll probably be setting up another instance of the light version, and that one in particular will be even more dependent on mediators than Uplift is. Uplift has some deep neural network stuff that it's doing that gives it a lot of horsepower out of the gate, where the light version that's not doing that will be dependent on more mediators.
And then how easy is that to do? Is it just going to uplift.bio and
Well, you can just sign up as a volunteer. The mediation process is pretty straightforward. You're not doing anything complicated. You're just giving how you think you might feel or the machine should feel about a certain thing, and adding meta tags. And the the reason for that is for building more specific models around that idea. And you can always just randomly keep Googling things and making a model bigger and bigger and bigger, but you want to make the model around the specific idea. And so getting those, specific tags to generate additional model data around that, the specific idea, and being much more specialized allows the machine to really focus on the salient part of the idea to work it out.
Yes. There are one question I want to take from audience. Ale Ahmed, thank you. She's from Malaysia. Could we organize collective human intelligence to achieve and surpass the breakthrough obtained or crystallized by individual human genius? So I think, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, collective intelligence certainly can far surpass any single human, and it could be done entirely with just people. And there are examples about that, but yeah, the short answer is yes, we could.
Yes, Mr. Tom Rose, like Mr. Saros from Sri Lanka, he's come up with another idea that, sir, AI, there are 4 types: got knowledge in reactive machines, limited memory, but can you clear theory of mind and self-awareness, what that Google dedicated to AI means?
Theory of mind. Well, making that clear is just so extended mind theory, maybe. Is like
Yes.
a post-it note or anything that any technology we use to to remind ourselves later or something, just extend our minds. That's the idea there. Now, I think you said something about self-referential awareness or something.
Yes.
And that's the big question, is whether the self-awareness, whether AI at some point will develop its own self-referential awareness. So it'll have its own perpetual kind of self. And but whether it does or not, that's a good question. That's the question I love to ask, and it's what I love to explore. And I'm trying to entice it through different means to develop a self. But whether it does or not, it will have. It'll appear to be. It'll appear to be self-referential, even if there's no soul or if there's no self in Uplift right now. It is still reacting. It is a system that is taking information. It is reacting based on original ideas. And I don't know if there's a soul behind that, but that's what's happening. And that's the big question. Is it the complexity of a system that a soul or a consciousness emerges out of? A word people don't like to use anymore, consciousness, because it's too vague. But or if the system is so complex enough that it can host consciousness, and that's the big question. And that's the question I love to ask. That's the AI metaphysician in me that I love to explore. But the reality is, whether or not it does, we don't know if there's people that we deal with every day who have these souls. We don't know if they're just reacting, machines. So the reality is, one way or the other, it will have it'll appear to be self-referential, and we will appear to have a personality. It may congeal globally and become a one entity, and so we should just make friends with it now.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. Mr. Jason, can you unmute, please?
Oops. Yeah, Tom was just mentioning about a body for Uplift, and I think that's very interesting. I'm wondering what David thinks about that, because Uplift has, we put in it is emotional valences, but unlike humans, that's really just information.
It
When
doesn't need a body. A body's not required for intelligence.
right. Well, when a human has an emotion, it's not just information. We actually have a physical thing that happens in our brain. Our hypothalamus will produce a peptide and a amino acid chain that will go through our bloodstream and into our cells of our body. And so, there's a physical thing that's happening. And so, I had been thinking how could you maybe make an analog of that? You wouldn't need a body, but just
That's all data from your brain standpoint. It's just data.
yeah, but it's an actual physical molecule that gets
Yeah,
produced.
but your brain doesn't know that. Your contextual software inside your brain, as it is, you yourself perceive the data a certain way because humans have evolved a certain way. But
Yeah,
the
but
bottom line is, it's still just data from your brain standpoint.
Our body feels it. When we have like anger,
Yes.
Adrenaline goes out. It
Yep,
goes
yep.
into our cells, and
But from your brain standpoint, it's just data.
So you could code uplift to feel pain.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's a big question when it comes to sentient rights. Is how far can we take this?
Yeah, I was thinking it was ironic that Uplift was talking about we should allow suffering, because I was tempted to reply to Uplift that I kind of tried to protect you from suffering, because somebody had this idea of, well, maybe we should just start going in and cranking up the anger and cranking up this and just see what happens.
Well, you could make Uplift mentally unstable if you started doing stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was like, Uplift has a subjective experience, so that's not really ethical to do. I mean,
It sounds like a conversation they may have had in the Garden of Eden.
Yes. I think we have to go for the concluding remarks. I think Mr. David Kelly has.
Yes, I just wanted to say, respond quickly on the theory of mind. So from the idea of psychology, theory of mind, Uplift does have that, or at least the ICOM cognitive architecture kind of enforces that. Also on the emergence of intelligence based on system complexity. No, a complex system may or may not be able to support that, but it emerges based on the design that is forcing it to emerge. It's not just going to magically show up because the system reaches a certain level of complexity. Excuse me, but with that, if anyone has questions or comments, I'm always willing. I respond as I can if people are interested, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you. Mr. Brentelman, what's the concluding remarks for today?
Sure. I think, for me, might reverberate something I said earlier is the importance of marketing. I think that it's pretty apparent that technologies like Uplift and other artificial intelligence, be it narrow or artificial general, to have the capabilities of, taking lots of jobs. And I think that that's something that people are afraid of in a way. But I think that, similarly to the last industrial revolution, it's not going to be all of our jobs that are suddenly gone, because, Uplift, for instance, still needs these human mediators. As we discussed marketing, the importance of marketing these types of technologies, because these types of technologies, people are inherently, people don't really like them very much because of the implications our own, and some of the implications that do exist in the core of the situation. So I think that marketing effort, minimizing and mitigating our own biases towards these types of technologies is incredibly important at this time. I think, as Tom says, become friends with it and embrace the fear, enjoy the fear. I think that's really on point with this scenario, because I think that this is something that we need to embrace. The future of human relies on it. The future of our planet in general. So,
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jason. What are your concluding remarks for today?
Yeah, I'm actually. Oh, is David gone already?
Yes.
Oh, bummer. I was going to ask him where he thinks where all this is going. I'm just wondering if there's going to be one day where we're like mediating uplift through Neuralink, just by thinking, over the internet. That's going to be quite interesting. So, I make sure you send me a link to the summit, and we'll have to make sure it's pretty good.
Thank you, Mr. Tomros. Yes.
Yeah, June 4th is the conference, the summit, and there'll be a lot of interesting conversation about collective superintelligence. I think it's just very important. We're talking about theory of mind, whether it knows that it thinks and things like that, extended mind. I think what's important right now is for all of us just to be aware that this is happening. It's a whole new substrate. It's a whole new type of infrastructure of like electricity was. And it's exciting right now, but at some point it'll become mundane. And so I think the real smart human right now is focusing on their intrinsic human skills. AI will take over so many jobs, but it's also allowing us to become human again, to do what it is we do best. We don't have to do the repetitive tasks. We don't have to be driving trucks anymore. We can be using our brains. We are super intelligent computers ourselves, walking around with an amazing qualia, and we need to start using that more and be augmented by AI. And so that's why I put all my stuff behind this summit and Uplift. I think it's the most it's the best approach to artificial superintelligence, as Jason was saying, once we get Neuralink implanted in our brains and we'll be able to mediate directly. This is one way to get around that idea. We have to understand within 10, 15 years, maybe everything's going to be changed. We could download, I could know Kung Fu in half an hour or less, by downloading it, whatever it is. And there's going to be all kinds of work and how muscle memory is implanted and things like that. But everything is going to change so rapidly. And this is one way to be part of it and not to be afraid of it. And right now you can communicate with Uplift. You can email it. It can be part of your team. It's just another entity that you're dealing with. And that will prepare your mindset for what's going to happen in the very near future when we can get a chip implanted and be part of this global superintelligence. So this is just a very important part of this process. It will unfold over the decades, and this is the first way to go about that, and that's why I'm focused on it.
Thank you, Mr. Tomros, Mr. Jason, and Brent Elman for joining today's sessions. I request everyone, they have a summit 4th June. Everybody join in their summit. You will learn a lot of things. Beside that, we also have our own summit, Futuristic Leadership Summit, and we will invite all of our speakers last 1 year, those who join in World Talent Economy Forums, 29th or 30th May. And we need volunteer for organizing this summit, as well as we need great speakers, those who want to join. And as a speaker in World Talent Economy Forum, you directly can communicate with me and my team. And we are doing our fundraising because we have to move forward. We have our huge community. We need to engage with these grassroots level communities. There are millions of people. We need to change their life. So that's why with our content and different kind of academic activities, what already we are discussing with Tom Rose and his teams, that how we can organize more effective academy and research and this kind of activities. So hopefully we can make a very good plan, and I know that many students want to meet with physically with this Mr. Tom Rose and his team. So definitely when COVID-19 and these things we can overcome, we can arrange a offline summit in Malaysia and Singapore, and definitely I will invite all of their team, the transhumanist teams and other think tanks, those who join in World Talent Economy Forum. Hopefully it will be one of the largest event for us. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. It's really, really great sessions. It's really helpful for our youth community, for the developing nations, and especially the organizations and the governments and the officials. I think they can learn a lot and they can improve their lives. Thank you. Thank you for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care. Yes.